So today in Policy Discuss, we'll delve into the growing relationship between Nigeria and China, as that relationship has resulted in a trade exceeding $20 billion. The goal here is to understand clearly what the advantages and disadvantages of this trade is, so that we can foster new ways or perhaps make suggestions on how it can be mutually beneficial to both parties. I've been joined by a favorite, or one of my favorite anchors, because here all three of them are my favorite. Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze, even though he has refused to cut soap for me, Prayer Krumale, and of course David Chiedu. So they did an arrangement behind me to twin today. It's no problem, let the men do your thing. Don't worry, maybe Evelyn tomorrow will have that conversation with me, so she and I can twin. So it will be, you know, ladies or women talk to women and women understand. But first, welcome David.
Thank you very much, Blessing. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning.
Nigerians. It's a wonderful Monday morning, and it's even better, much better, being here to, of course, further conversations that shape what the country should look like, both on the continental stage and on the global stage, of course.
So, looking at the trade relationship between Nigeria and China, in 2023, the trade between Nigeria and China reached $22 billion. So for the year 2024, it exceeded $20 billion. There was a decline, however, but it's still huge when we talk about trading partners, particularly between China and an African country. That is huge. But let's take a look at the components of that trade. What actually trade agreement or arrangement or whatever happened between Nigeria and China that gave us over $20 billion in trade. For Nigeria, basically primary imports, crude oil. And then for China, we have manufactured goods, which sells so much in Nigeria, because it's like the average businessman who is an importer in Nigeria, importing from electronics to even textile materials, sources most of their merchandise from China. What's your take on this trade relationship between China and Nigeria, Doc?
Well, I don't tend to agree with as if we're doing well trading with China. Yeah, because here is only one party that's actually enjoying and benefiting, because if you look at the balance, it's hugely skewed in favor of China. And this is because as a country, we're also not very deliberate in terms of setting our economic policies agenda when we relate with other people in the world. China is doing a whole lot of things in Africa and indeed Nigeria. And if you look at the volume of trade that China is doing in Africa, Nigeria constitutes about 20% of its market as we speak. So in other words, all the money that China is mining from Africa, Nigeria contributes about 20%. Now the question is, how much is Nigeria gaining from China? So if you look at that trade balance, you see that somebody is doing less than 10%. China trades $20 billion in Africa, and what we can sell to China is not is not up to $2 billion US dollars. So it shows that Nigeria is the real market for China in Africa. And given our population and our natural endowment, I think that the Nigerian government, or those who represent us in terms of trade relations, should be much more strategic in seeing how to twist the hand of China, that beyond just shipping primary products to China and crude, which of course constitutes the greater chunk of that means, Nigeria should be able to deal with China in terms of asking China much more investment in Africa. And I think that's what Mr. President did the last time the Foreign Secretary of China visited Nigeria. And the President said, you're a powerful man in the cabinet of China. We need much more investment in China. We're not asking you to come dash us money. Bring more money, set up those factories here, and use Nigeria as a distribution hub for Africa, so that we are no longer going to China to bring these goods here. They can actually be manufactured in Nigeria, and then we sell in you sell in your sub-Saharan Africa. And then, of course, we can get much value than they coming to take those resources off here. And then they resell them back to us in finished goods, and we're paying through our nose. And our foreign exchange situation is worsening on a daily basis. And then prices of goods and services are on the rooftop. And these are very, very germane issues that we need to confront. Just on Saturday, we're looking at buying some stuff. Just ordinary stand for a camera, and people say, oh, 2 years ago, the price was about 35,000. Today it's sold at 250,000. You see the leap. So if you were to calculate that in inflation rate, you see that it's over 400, 500% in inflation between 2022 and 2025. So you can see how Africans are paying hugely for the increase that is necessitated by Forex. If these things are manufactured here, we will not need foreign exchange to go to Ghana to go import them. The trade will be done here in Naira, and then our condition can be better. So I think that we need to do much more in terms of really pushing China to do more in Nigeria, since we constitute the bulk of its trade in Africa.
Now, Doc has highlighted a number of facts and also made some suggestions regarding how things can be corrected. Now, he talked about the business or the trade being skewed in favor of China. Now, for Nigeria being a major market for China in Africa, and Nigeria may be talking to China to make some investment, how do you see that? Is it that Nigeria cannot create a market for China as much as China has created? Look at what China provides for Nigeria. How do we come to the point of providing so much that China has to just make Nigeria the market than asking for some investment? Now, if you look at the investment, some investment that China has, sometimes the labor for those investments rely heavily on China. And so there's limitation to transfer of technology, which would benefit Nigeria more.
At this point in time, I'm pretty much inclined to agreeing with a number of points which Doctor has made. We have quite the issue on our hands, but just looking at it on the surface, having this sort of numbers coming out of our trade relationship with China is not, first of all, I'm going to look at it from the perspective of glass half full, and then otherwise, it's active markets, more liquidity, and then of course you have better order execution, and of course there is the seamless connection between seller, buyer, and all of that, which is great. And then you made a statement earlier asking what the drivers are that led to these numbers or these figures, as the case may be. Again, still going back to what Doctor said not too long ago, we have a production problem. That has always been our issue. With all of what we've had going on with China, in the last, 45 or plus years, because our relationship with them started back in the 70s. I think that was toward the end of the First Republic and the commencement of the Second Republic. So we've had that relationship for that long. But for some reason, the elephant in the room has always been the trade imbalance between both nations. So you have China investing, or rather you have China providing infrastructure, contributing to most of our infrastructure that we have here, based off of what we sell to them, or based off of what they can get from us. You have the CSCEC, that's the Chinese engineering company. A lot of what they have by way of contract numbers. In fact, as far as their stance on the world is concerned, they are the largest construction outfit. And then a lot of their contracts by numbers come from Nigeria. So it says without going, it goes without saying, beg your pardon, that Nigeria here is their biggest market. So where then do we plug in the problem? We're talking about what Doctor has mentioned earlier, which of course I'm going to take a bit further. there's oil and gas. There's agriculture products, which, including livestock, of course, which we've traded with them for a while. And then, of course, there's solid minerals, which they take from here. I mean, we have a lot of them in sedimentary, concentrate in some portions of the country. We have that in Benue, and I reckon we have that in Ebonyi State as well. And then, of course, we have about 10 million metric tons, if my figures are not failing me at this point in time. Yes, actually, that's what it is. We have about 10 million metric tons of lead ore, which goes to China. So when you have these things, sold to them, when they buy these things to us, from us rather, they bring them back to us in, machinery. They bring them back to us in manufactured goods. So it tells you that we need to do more in terms of our industrial sector. It tells you that we need to do more in, with regards to what we produce from here, so that as far as our relationship with them is concerned, we don't end up always having to grab the shorter end of the stick, which is, which has in fact been the problem, and goes back to our problems with not, with not providing an not being able to provide an enabling environment where we can actually, provide more value, because they seem to be the ones providing value. We seem to be the ones giving them just what to work with, essentially primary product. So that, in my opinion, is where we need to, channel more of our effort to unskew, let me use that word, unskew this trade imbalance, or more or less skew it back into our favor, because it does seem like we've been at the shorter end of this particular stick.
Now, the issue between Nigeria and China in terms of trade imbalance is not particular to China alone, though China seems to be one of the biggest trading partners to Nigeria. How do we change that narrative? A lot of times we talk about making the countries that come to seek primary products have industries here to utilize it, so that we become the first gainers. Doc, you talked about China creating an industrial hub here, so that this becomes the off-take point for a lot of this. Are we not at the mercy of those countries if we're expecting that they do that without us first having our own? Does it start at the point of a trade agreement? How would we be able to ensure that we state what we want, and what we want is what will favor us, and we're making them stick to that arrangement?
Yeah, I think it's a function of government functionaries who should know what to do. And I think that we're seriously lacking. The person who is talking here is the ambassador of China to Nigeria. And is having huge handshake with the president of Nigeria. And tells senior government officials, we need to do a lot in terms of trade relations. How do ambassadors in these other countries relate with the government of their home country is another fundamental flaw in Nigeria economic relations. Because when they don't put round peg in round holes, they don't fit. So in terms of also choosing who represents Nigeria in other countries, we must also look for real seasoned diplomats who can strike deals and negotiate things on behalf of Nigeria. The president of Nigeria does not necessarily need to be traveling all the world around to sell Nigeria. That's the role and the function of the ambassador who represent Nigeria in those countries.
But why do we have a twist in that here in Nigeria?
That is a challenge, and I think that is because we politicize even every kind of appointment. Now, if you have an ambassador who sits in the US, the role of that ambassador is not just to sit down and welcome Mr. President coming to the US. The role of the ambassador is to see how to penetrate the market, the private market of the American people, and ensure that businessmen in America find interest in Nigeria. Because his primary role as an ambassador is to sell Nigeria to that country, to say, there are opportunities right here at home we know that you can do these things. We can create this environment. We can strike this deal with our own government so that you can set up factories here in Nigeria or invest in this kind of sector. Now, this is what the ambassador should be doing. It should not be seen as a kind of exit leave for some people who, of course, we feel we needed to settle as political associates, and then we say, okay, go and spend the next 4 years or the next 2 years in China and have some good time. It should be somebody who is at work for Nigeria, talking about deals, striking deals with private individuals, with Nigerians who are resident in those countries, and see how we can collaborate to actually bring business home and take businesses from Nigeria into those climes.
Doc, the ambassadors we have in Nigeria, ambassador offices in Nigeria, are they having that power and made to take out responsibilities like that? Because it seems as if what we have is what obtains in the civil service, where it's as if except the person who's at the apex there speaks or takes action, you can't do anything. That seems to be what we're having between, in the case of ambassadors, ministers, and even the president. Except the president makes the initiative or seals a deal between Nigeria and another country, the ministers, it appears like they don't have that power to do that. Unlike what we see ambassadors, we see ministers of other countries coming to negotiate deals, even with the Nigerian president, coming to execute projects on behalf of their country. But we don't seem to, it doesn't seem as if the ministers, the ambassadors from Nigeria are vested with that power. They have that consciousness, and they're giving that free mandate to execute.
There's nobody who gives you free mandate. It's an international policy that when you appoint an ambassador to a country, that ambassador is not just a human being. It's actually the president of Nigeria in that country.
Are they oriented in that way? The reason I'm asking because
to be oriented. You see, the problem is that
the reason I ask
when you have a politicization, that's what I'm talking about in terms of appointment. When you want to send envoys to country, especially countries where you have interests, where you want to penetrate, you send in somebody who is a huge negotiator into that environment to broker deals on your behalf, because it's actually your mouthpiece. Now, an ambassador does not represent the country. An ambassador represents the president. He has a direct first-line charge to the president. So it is not as if he's empowered. No, he's not a civil servant. He is somebody who speaks any word that an ambassador speaks, is speaking on behalf of the president. And any initiative that the ambassador must take is on behalf of the president of the country. So what they do is that you have people who are proactive enough. We need seasoned diplomats. Even those who are practitioners, they are almost now constituting a little fraction of those we send as ambassador. I'm speaking of this because, of course, it's due now to also appoint new ambassadors who will be going out to represent Nigeria. And I think that we should tap into the professional pool of people who work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who understand these trade relations and see how we can send them as negotiator. We are how do I put it now? We are strategic in terms of appointment. Look at it. Donald Trump is appointing foreign secretary. He's looking at who's going to go there. He's thinking of who's going to be the Minister of Commerce. He knows who is going to go there. He's thinking of somebody who is a die-hard negotiator to go to the Middle East and speak for him. So he's not going to look for anybody just because you supported my ambition to become a president and now I need to settle a lot of people. Then I use the ambassadorial office to settle people, and then they go there. They cannot actually perform the role that office requires. So for me, is recruiting hands that are strong enough to actually talk about the relations of that country with our country. I give you one instance. We were traveling somewhere from Dubai to Abu Dhabi some years ago, and it was during the fast. And in the fast, you know that nobody eats in the public in the UAE. So you have to eat in closes. You don't eat in the open. So we're in this taxi and we're asking, oh, can we eat? Because we're not fasting. And the driver was putting us and saying, well, So since you said your friend is an American, you can eat. Because if police stop you, the American ambassador will be right there immediately.
You're getting to the point of the question I was about to raise.
This is the point
but
I'm
I'll
making.
let you land.
Yes. So the American ambassador will be there, right there. Nigerians who are in the UAE are struggling to see the ambassador face. It's not because they are not empowered. It's because of how they see the room. So what I'm saying is that if you send the right person who understands what diplomacy is all about, whether it's economic diplomacy, social diplomacy, or political diplomacy, to represent you in a country, he will be more initiative, he will be more innovative and creative in terms of negotiating deals on behalf of your country and represent your country very well. So if you, as a citizen, I can't gain access to my ambassador, because the way the president is protected here, this is the same way in our own embassies, ambassadors or high commissioners are not assessed, even by residents, Nigerian residents in those countries. That's the point I'm making. It's not because there's any rule written here that say they cannot perform, but we are not using professionals. All we have done is that we recruit politicians to go represent us, and then they don't understand what the nitty-gritty of ambassadorial or diplomatic functions is all about.
Doc, the point of my question is this. From all you said, it's the ideal, but do we have the ideal working in our system? I am happy that you went to the point where even in foreign nations, Nigerians in the diaspora have restricted access to their ambassador. That's the point I was driving at. Because we've seen cases where situations happen that affect Nigerians in the diaspora and expecting that the Nigerian consulate there will interfere. You find that the ambassador sometimes is reluctant to speak, or when they speak, from what they say, there is no power backing their words until the president interferes and makes a statement or a pronouncement. There are no written rules, agreed, but there seems to be an unspoken rule that says you go there. So on certain matters, you do not even have the power to stand as a voice that is binding. Now, that rule may not be written anywhere, but it seems to be the orientation of ambassadors that we had from time immemorial. It's not about this administration alone. How many foreign ministers have we seen to be very active in the deals, in the discussions and relations with other countries? I think that one that we even saw that was up and doing, at least from what we were seeing on TV, was Jeffrey Newman. So it's about what has been the culture. So when people get into this role, what is the orientation? What is the expectation of them? And is there some unspoken rule that says you have a limit? Is that what has shortchanges in these people not being able to become negotiators? Are they sent there as negotiators?
Now, we don't particularly know what it is that their quote-unquote marching orders ab initio, talking about these emissaries, as it were. But from all we have seen, for decades now, we can all agree on one thing. They have very limited powers. They have very limited authorities. And that is indeed in and of itself the problem. Because if you have a system where a particular individual who knows his or her onions, who is worth their weight in gold, are deployed to a particular ministry to handle it simply because they are qualified. Take note of the word qualified. That's the operative word here. And if they're qualified, I would like to see, a situation where they have, perhaps you might want to be careful with saying total power, but at least they should have some level of, if you like, carte blanche to be able to execute certain, deals, broker certain deals, that is, and then, solve certain problems that would affect Nigeria on the global stage, because that is exactly what their jobs are as emissaries, as, foreign policy brokers, so to speak. Now, in the case of, what we're talking about now, I'm going to agree in part with what Doctor has said, where he talked about some people being square pegs in round holes and all of that. It's quite evident, because you see that these people. Let me digress a little bit. We've had we've had the Nigerian Trade Office in China. I think that's the Nigerian Export Promotional Center or Council in China since ratified more or less in 2003. And up until date, there isn't much to go by as far as, the made in Nigeria goods sold in China arrangement is concerned, because that is exactly what that thing, or that entity, beg your pardon, was set up for. Now you have the Nigerian ambassador to China since that particular, dispensation till this very moment. So, successive ones who have come and gone. What have they done with regards to that? Would they say that they didn't have enough power to, facilitate the actual essence of that particular agreement at the Nigerian Export Promotional Council in China, which was supposed to make sure that our presence in China was felt? It feels more often than not, when you look at it, broad strokes, that it's the presence of China in Nigeria being felt more, the presence of China in Nigeria being felt more than the presence of Nigeria in China being felt more. Now, narrowing it back to what we have, I would say that it's the failure of the process itself, the governance process itself, where you have these people, in some cases, if not most, being unclear with regards to what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and how they're supposed to do it. And in some other cases, even though it's clear, they are shackled in some regard by, authority, by the authority. That, of course, we know the authority I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the central authority, which for a long time there have been conversations about, decentering power in some regard, so that, certain other aspects of the country's, governance can have some sort of liquidity, if you like, or fluidity, if you like. Now, in this case, again, I go back to what I said earlier. It is either a case of them being unclear on what their, if you like, roles are with regards to mediation or with regards to intervention in certain situations the world over, as far as it concerns Nigeria, or that particular block, that's, micromanagement block, is somewhere in the mix that, has prevented them from actually going about what they're supposed to do effectively, showing capacity and making sure that, Nigeria is better off for having them in those very strategic positions.
Yeah, but look at it this way. The NIDCOM chairman, Honorable Abike Dabiri, functions more than our foreign ministers and our ambassadors. It's not because that he's given any power, it's because she's just running the mandate of our office. Every office has a mandate. Now, it's not somebody giving you power. In short, our president during his campaign said power is not served a la carte. You take power. So if they appoint you into an office, execute the constitutional mandate of that office. Let it be that somebody has called you to order or recall you back home because he did not like what you are doing, rather than bootlicking. What many people do in public office is eye service and bootlicking. If I'm appointed today to say, okay, go represent Nigeria in Cotonou, I should be all over Cotonou to ensure that the mandate of Mr. President, as regard, for example, how our borders there is maintained, that is my priority. Because what I'm here to do in Cotonou, I am there to champion the renewed hope agenda of Mr. President. And anything that, for example, will stand on the way of that renewed hope from being realized, I will be the champion. And I will be on Mr. President's neck to tell him that, look, there's an opportunity here. This person needs to be talked to. This person needs to be talked to who seems to be blocking it. And when we get those filler, Mr. President will be happy to see that those who are representing him, they are working very well. So what I'm simply saying is that ambassadorial office should not be seen like a retirement package or a pre-retirement package for those who are sent on missions abroad. These guys should understand that, yes, you are here to work yourself out to ensure that your country get the benefit which they are supposed. I read something early this morning on Instagram when, of course, they were asking the minister or the DG of FAN, why will you spend this so money on runway? And they said, well, that is what we want to spend on the runway. If it's not convenient for some people, I will step aside. Those are the kind of people we need to drive the Nigerian project. People who are willing to step aside when people are not willing to do what is right. So we need human beings who gets into these places, and I'm actually advocating for experts to represent us. People who are practitioners, rather than politicians, go to strategic states to represent us, and they don't know what to do or what the function of an ambassador is.
Okay, I think perhaps what would be the solutions for us to have career diplomat then people were just appointed, because if you're a career diplomat, you know what your role is, you know where to exercise your authority, and if there be any form of cloud that hangs over the heads of those in certain positions that makes them feel or act as though there's a limitation to what they can execute, what their power can reach, then I think that should be removed for the interest of the country. But let's look at the implication of the imbalance in Nigerian China trade or Nigerian businesses, aside technological products that Nigeria gets from China, from other things, equipment to equipment and to consumer goods. Nigeria is importing heavily from China. How do we stop this? Is it time for us to make some form of policy? When there was so much importation of rice from other countries by Nigeria during the former administration of former President Buhari, we saw that policy where there was a ban on rice importation. And so there were some measures to ensure that Nigeria begins to grow the rice that it consumes, even though there is still rice importation, but it's not as much as it used to be because capacity has been grown in the production of rice. Should we also now be making policies and government go beyond policies to having things on the ground that ensure that there is some manufacturing capacity for certain consumer goods, even though I know that there is the aspect of preference here where some Nigerians prefer goods that are made outside of Nigeria?
I will address that very soon with a few thoughts, but I want to just circle back a little bit to some of Doctor's last remarks. He talked about the people who are in this position being, or considering it, if you like, to be a retirement home or something of the sort. The question there that I would ask, just put out there essentially, if there's any answer that's going to come from the powers that be, perhaps, maybe not. But these people, do you actually let them understand what it is that they're supposed to do, first of all? Because we assume that they are professionals. You talked about career diplomats, right? We assume that they know exactly what they're doing. This is what they've done all their lives. So if you are not, or rather, if there is a problem with these people being in those positions and they're considering it a retirement home, isn't that supposed to be the function of the person who put them there to spot that and to, make adjustments where necessary if he or she sees that this person is just considering the job as, plaything or retirement home, as the case may be. But like I said, that's just a question I want to put out there. Now, to go back to what you said, Nigeria is, or to what you asked, rather, beg your pardon, Nigeria is it's a haven of potential. Why do you think the likes of China have been courting us for donkey years now? Why do you think, the likes of America, the likes of, India and co, and the UK have been courting us forever and a day? Now, as I said earlier, how we can deal with what appears to be our quote and unquote challenge goes back to one thing: harnessing our enormous potential. Right now, we have a teeming population that makes up two-thirds of, young population, beg your pardon, that makes up two-thirds of the overall population of Nigerians. And these days, a lot of these people in this demographic are driven to, shiny things. And this is what I mean. It's the new toy, it's the shiny object syndrome or the new toy, syndrome. They love anything that essentially is the rave of the moment. And what is the rave of the moment at this point in time? We're talking about technology, tech. Now, harnessing tech equals more investment, equals more productivity, equals more jobs. Now, what that does for us is all the affiliates, if you like, or all the sectors that are heavily dependent. I don't think there's anyone these days that doesn't have a level or two of technological involvement. So all of these things coalesce, all of these things come together to make sure that Nigeria grows. Now look at China's GDP. Last year, it grew by 50%, beg your pardon, by 5.0%. Yeah, that's 5%. Ours for 2024 was about 2.9%. In 2023, it was even less than that. The NESG is predicting that our economy is going to grow by, our GDP rather is going to grow by 5.5% this year. Whether that's going to happen is left to be seen. So again, I go back to what I said a moment ago. We are a country of enormous potential. So if you harness that, we're talking technology, you're talking services. In this case, in the financial sector, where you have fintechs haven't sprung up in the last 4 or 5 years, and in most cases, the preferable choice to the age-long commercial banks, as you were. So a lot of these things, you put them into perspective, and you realize that our problem is not necessarily a problem per se, depending on how you look at it or from what prism of what angle of the prism you look at it. But the fact that we've not really had the individuals at the helm of power, strategic positions that is, that would look inward and harness the potential of Nigeria. There's something these people, whether it's Eurasia or the Americas, are looking at inside here that we're not seeing. The question to answer right now is, what have they seen that have made them latch onto us like leeches to blood?
And if we find what they've seen, we know in some cases what they've seen. We know they've seen raw materials. We know they've seen primary products that they possibly can't get in any other part of the world than Africa, and so they're coming for it. And how cheaply we're letting this primary products go is a source of concern to Africans, a source of concern to Nigerians. You've mentioned quite some minerals that China sources from Nigeria. How do we sell them? Do they go through the right channel, or there is some illegitimate market, illegal markets, if you like, that they purchase this thing from, and so just like they give some handouts to those who are selling them. So a lot needs to be done by Nigeria. When we talked about Trump, the president of the US, Donald Trump, making some changes to trade agreement and coming up with imposition of tariff hikes, a lot of people felt, oh, this man is just trying to cause war. But I think it's a thing that every country needs to do: revisit trade agreements and change the way in which trade agreements are carried out, so that you are not at the losing end at the end of the day. You may be seen doing business, but it's a business favoring you. So like the news that we saw, that the trade between Nigeria has exceeded $20 billion. Oh, many people would rejoice and say, wow, you see, we're doing so well. China's presence in Nigeria is doing a lot of good. Yes, they've done good in some parts, but are we really benefiting as we should? So I think it's time for us to begin to engage those areas and begin to look at ways that it can be better. But we should not wait for China or any other country to industrialize us. We also have a responsibility to kickstart the process of industrialization. That's why we have our institutions. If it needs us, send them for some training. Because if we're waiting for these countries to hand us some technology by way of technology transfer, they have also devised means to ensure that, yes, you can have local content, but it does not, at the end of the day, result in technology transfer.